Hi folks, another day in the TGB workshop here. Now, I started stripping it down. As you know, we've got a problem with it won't start basically. It tries to start, as you've seen in the previous video. I've basically, as you know, put the electrics back to normal, although I'm waiting still for a couple of components. But I was going to check the stator for the actual charging circuit, and also that sends the trigger to the ignition coil, which will obviously determine whether or not we're getting a good enough spark. So what I've actually done, I started stripping down the other side of the bike because it's on the other side of the bike. So let me show you where it actually is. So here we are on the right hand side of the bike, and I've taken, there's a cover that goes over the front here, I've taken that off. And then there's this sort of impeller thing that sits over the top there as well. I've taken all that off, and I was in the process of just undoing this nut here to take the magneto part off, because underneath here is where the actual stator lives. These are the cables here. Where is it? Let me just show you. This is the cable here that goes up and plugs up there, as you know. So I've unplugged that, and whilst I was in the process of just looking at this, I don't know whether you can see or not, but let's move that exhaust out of the way for a minute. Can you actually see what's happening here? Now, I don't know if you can see that. We've got sideways movement on the crank. Now, that isn't a good sign. Basically, what that means is if you shouldn't be able to move that sideways. With a crankshaft, you normally get what they call end float. You really don't want a lot of end float, but no way should you be able to move. As you can see what I can do there, I don't know if you can actually, can you see that? The sideways movement in that pulley there denotes that the crankshaft bearings are shot. Now that could be the reason why it's not starting. I've actually done a compression test. The compression test was okay, but when you've got that much play in the crankshaft, that can alter things dramatically with regards to ignition timing and stuff like that. And as I said to you, it did try to start, but that there is definitely knackered crankshaft bearings, and to get them out of the bike means dropping the engine out and splitting the crankcase. Now realistically, if I was doing this bike literally just to make money, and you have this sort of, if you've got a bike with this sort of problem, I mean, I didn't spend a lot of money on this bike at all. It was well under £200 basically, so you know, it's a decent enough bike. If you're going to keep it and sort of use it, it's worth doing the work, because to actually change the crankshaft bearings on this, although it seems a lot of work to strip the engine out and get the engine out, it's a relatively simple job, and the parts are actually very cheap. The crank bearing, there's two bearings on the crankshaft, and there's also two seals on there as well, and to buy a kit for doing them is only £25. So although it's what you would call major engine work, it's a small 50cc moped, and basically it's worth doing the work. And even if you go to the extent of buying a new crank for these, a brand new crank is only £82, and also you're looking, if you had to have a new top end on it, the cylinder head and barrel and piston and that lot, that's only about £47 to £50 anyway. So basically you could virtually rebuild these for like a couple of £100. But if you're trying to make money out of something like this, you're not going to make money out of it, because you're going to have to spend more than what the bike's blinking worth to get it up and running again. But if you're doing this sort of job, if you've got one of these bikes, rather than get rid of it, because this is a good, reliable, solid bike, I would imagine, we're going to have to take the engine out. As you can see, that play has to be addressed first before I go any further, because once I put that right, the only other thing I need to check then, obviously, is the stator underneath, which is what I was in the process of taking off, and that involves me pulling this off the flywheel. So I'm not going to do that now. I've got to get the old engine out, so I'm going to carry on and persevere and try and get the engine out of the bike, which basically means trying to support the bike somehow, because the centre stand is actually attached to the engine, and the rear wheel is attached to the engine as well. I can undo this carriage here, as you can see, by undoing these two bolts here. That will bring the rear off, and I'll take the wheel off, the wheel nut off there, and move the wheel out of the way. I've got to disconnect all the ancillary stuff. I'm going to try and leave a lot of the stuff in situ. I'm going to have to support the bike, obviously, in the air. I won't leave it here, because I'm going to be working on the hydrographics tank sometime, probably tomorrow. So I'll push this over right over to the other side of the workshop, get this lot out, and then we'll have to actually strip the engine down. Very similar to the Gilera Runner. If you actually look in my list of videos, you'll see exactly the same thing we've done for the Gilera Runner for Jimmy's bike, which was involved in splitting the crankshafts. So anyway, I'm going to carry on now and whip the engine out. Right, the idea here is to leave as much on the bike as I can. So I'm just undoing that clamp on the carburettor and just sort of levering it forward. Now that pulls all that off in one go, as you can see, so I'm happy for that to be left there. I've got the main bar which comes through the top of the engine there. There's the automatic choke cable. Okay, so I've got the rear shock to do around the other side now. I've not actually left myself much space to work in here. Let's push that through there for a minute. I could actually take that airbox off, but as long as I can get to where I need to. What size are these? It's 12mm. The nut's on the back of 13, but I've got an adjustable here. So let's just put that on there for now. Just to stop the nut from turning, that's all. So let's just undo that. There we go. There we go, baby. Again, with old bikes, well, any old vehicle I suppose really, when things are left out in the elements, you'll notice a jar of WD-40 or a bottle of WD-40 comes in very handy for getting rusted or seized nuts and bolts out of. I must say though, I've not really come against any problem with fixings at all with this bike. There we go, that's free. And I'll always put the bolts back in where they come from so that you don't lose them. So I'll just stick that there. So I've got the big bolt going through the frame there still to do. And I've also got the rear swinging arm and also the wheel to get off. So I'm going to go back around the other side. Right, okay. This is the swinging arm bolts. So I'm just going to basically just crack them open. There we go, there's one. And underneath there, there's two. Now, I should be getting a method now of actually supporting the bike. So I'm going to go and get some blocks or something just to block the bike up so I can pull this actual area, the wheel out. But before I do that, I'll just undo this rear wheel nut here. Because I'm going to need to take the wheel off because that is connected to the engine. So get that washer out of there as well. Wheel spacer, get the wheel washer. Okay, that's off now. So once I basically undo these two brackets, this whole thing will be able to pull off the actual engine. So I'm just going to go and get some blocks now to block up the bike so it don't fall over. Must remember that brush washer goes back on there. Now the thing is, this is where it needs support. What I'm going to do is tip it onto its side stand. Take it off the centre stand. Like that. And if I just lean it over on the side stand, that should hopefully give me some clearance. I'm going to push away, you see. If I push the bike away. No, that's not working, is it? Put it back on the side, centre stand. So all I've got to do now is undo this big bolt here, which is what holds straight through the engine. Once that's out, then the engine's going to literally drop out of the bike and I can lower the actual bike to the floor. As I say, I could have done with 2 people here, but I'm not that lucky. If it falls, it falls. Let's move you back a little bit in case it goes tits up. There we go. That's the engine out of the bike. Just lower that down for a minute. I've got to keep that up high. Let's take that forward. And drop it down over there. There we go. Right, so there we go. That's the engine out of the bike. Still got the centre stand with it, but what I should do now is I'll give it a good clean down, because you don't want to strip this engine down and have all this grime possibly going in, because we've got to split the casings. And I'm just looking at this engine here. It looks like it's had a repair before. Can you see that? Look, it looks like an engine lug has actually broken off there, and someone's actually re-welded this back on, because that isn't a factory weld. That's what it would have looked like when it would have come out of the factory. So this has been apart before, I would suggest. I don't quite know how that's going to affect what I'm going to be doing. It shouldn't make no difference whatsoever, to be honest with you, but it just shows you this bike has actually been stripped down before, and the engine has actually been out before. So I'm going to just give this a good clean off now and go inside. It's getting dark now. The time now is nearly 5 o'clock. I'm going to have a cup of tea, wash my hands, have something to eat, put my feet up, and tomorrow's another day. So anyway, never expected to be doing this to this moped, but I'm really only doing it just to really show you, if you've got one of these, the sort of things you're going to come up against if you get a moped problem like the one that a non-starting job. And if you've checked the electrics, I'm pretty certain now that the electrics are pretty much okay. I still haven't checked the stator yet, because obviously I found the bearings were knackered, so everything had to stop, because that's one of the, well, that is the priority job now that's got to be done. So I'm just letting you see the sort of work involved in stripping these mopeds down, and the sort of things that you're going to come up against. So I'm going to leave it there for today. I hope you've enjoyed this little video. I nearly fell over when I was manhandling the bike on my own, but that's just one of those things. I just make do with what I've got around me. Sometimes you have to do that. Ideally you should have 2 people there, or maybe some way of actually winching the bike up to the ceiling. I could have actually done that as well to support it, so I could have just dragged that out. So anyway, thanks very much. Hope you enjoyed this little video, and we'll see you again in the next video on the TGB moped. Thanks very much. Bye for now.